Also got some other breaking news just coming into us now. New details about the health of former President Biden and that prostate cancer diagnosis. A couple of new details literally just in from his team and ours here, with a spokesperson telling our Kelly O'Donnell that before Friday, the former president had not been diagnosed with cancer. We're also learning more about when he last had that so-called PSA screening that detects any abnormalities in the blood. This is after, of course, that announcement that the former president has an aggressive form of the cancer that has spread to his bones, with a lot of questions around how long he may have had this, around whether this could or should have been caught sooner. Kelly is joining us now after getting that new reporting in just the last couple of minutes. Thanks for getting to a camera, Kel. So fill us in as to what we're learning and why it's significant.
These are incremental updates, but they do address some of the questions that have come after the world has sort of absorbed this news about the former president. And his office says that he was diagnosed on Friday with this type of prostate cancer that had metastasized to his bones, making it, based on what medical experts say, doctors and so forth, incurable but treatable. And so what we're learning now is the question of, could that have happened quickly? Since the time he left office? Or is it likely that there was an undiagnosed cancer during the time that he served in the White House here? So a couple of facts that are responsive to that. His advisors say that he was never diagnosed with prostate cancer prior to the Friday diagnosis. And also they're saying that his last PSA test, that's that blood test that measures an antigen related to the prostate gland in men, was last done in 2014. That's a long time ago, but that does line up with what the general medical advice is. For men at age 70, that would be no longer a recommended test. And it is a test that gives an indication. It is not conclusive. That we've all been reading about how there are sometimes false positives, false negatives. So that would have been within the guidelines of appropriate medical care for a man of his age. Now, you could ask further questions, but he's not just a typical man over 70. He was the president of the United States. And could there have been more screening or more testing? And those are the kinds of questions that inevitably follow all of this. But his office is providing that information. 2014 for the last PSA test, no cancer diagnosis prior to Friday. Hallie? And
just so folks understand sort of why these questions have come up from a comparison basis here, Kel, in 2014, former President Biden would have been over the age of 70. Current President Trump is over the age of 70, but we understand from the White House and from his medical screening that he does get that screening and did as recently as this past year, despite his age, right?
It wasn't notable at the time, but in the formal report that was put out when the current president's medical summary was released, it does indicate a PSA test that is 0.1, so well below the 4, which is the normal range. He is going to be 79 next month. We don't know why he's taking the test, but President Biden did not. Those are medical questions that are really between doctor and patient, and perhaps we'll be able to get more insight on that going forward.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.